The moment they discover who he really is, every insult will become a mistake they can never take back. The executive boardroom on the 42nd floor of Johnson Global Holdings had never been this quiet. Men and women who controlled billion-dollar divisions sat frozen in their seats, their eyes fixed on the glass doors at the far end of the room. Outside, Manhattan shimmered beneath a bright spring sky, but inside, tension hung so heavily in the air that nobody seemed willing to breathe. Samantha Reed, the company's powerful human resources director, adjusted her designer blazer and forced a smile that looked more nervous than confident. Something felt wrong. Very wrong. Just 10 minutes earlier, she had walked into this emergency meeting expecting another routine corporate announcement. Instead, every board member had been instructed to attend in person. No explanations. No agenda. No exceptions. Even Victoria Johnson, the billionaire founder and CEO of the company, had canceled an international business trip to be there. That alone was enough to make people uneasy. Samantha glanced toward Brittany Collins, the daughter of one of the company's largest investors. Brittany sat upright with her hands folded neatly on the conference table, trying to appear calm. In reality, she was just as curious as everyone else. For months, rumors had circulated throughout the company that Victoria Johnson was preparing to announce her successor. Most employees assumed the future leader would be some famous executive recruited from another Fortune 500 company. Others believed Victoria might finally reveal her son, the mysterious heir nobody had ever seen. The truth was that almost nobody knew what Marcus Johnson looked like. While magazines frequently featured Victoria on their covers, her son had remained completely out of the public eye. Suddenly, the doors opened. Every head turned. A young assistant stepped inside first. Then she moved aside respectfully. The room instantly fell silent. Samantha blinked once, then twice. Her heart skipped. That couldn't be right. Standing in the doorway was a tall black man wearing a perfectly tailored charcoal suit. His posture was calm. His expression was unreadable. Yet there was something familiar about him. Something Samantha recognized immediately. The realization struck her like a bolt of lightning. Her mouth opened slightly. Across the table, Brittany's face lost all color. Several executives exchanged confused looks. One elderly board member actually removed his glasses and cleaned them before looking again. Nobody seemed able to understand what they were seeing, because the man standing there was someone they all knew, or at least they thought they knew him. Samantha's hands began to tremble beneath the table. Just 3 days earlier, she had publicly humiliated this same man in front of dozens of employees. She had laughed at him, dismissed him, treated him like he didn't matter. Yet now, every executive in the room was staring at him with shock. The stranger walked forward confidently. Expensive Italian shoes clicked softly against the polished floor. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. Then Victoria Johnson slowly rose from her chair. The billionaire CEO smiled proudly and gestured toward the empty seat beside her. "Thank you for joining us," she said. "We've all been waiting for you." And in that moment, Samantha Reed realized her entire world was about to change. 3 months earlier, Marcus Johnson sat alone in a private dining room overlooking Central Park, staring through floor-to-ceiling windows at the city below. The view was worth millions of dollars. The meal in front of him had been prepared by one of the most respected chefs in New York. Yet none of it interested him. Across the table, Victoria Johnson folded her hands and studied her son carefully. "You turned down another introduction," she said. Marcus sighed, because it was exactly like all the others. Victoria shook her head. "The Collins family is respected. Brittany is educated, successful, and well-connected." Marcus looked away, and she spent 20 minutes asking about trust funds, private jets, and vacation homes. She was making conversation. "No, Mom." She was evaluating an investment. Victoria remained silent. This was not the first version of this discussion. For years, friends, investors, executives, and family acquaintances had tried to introduce Marcus to potential partners. Every meeting ended the same way. The women seemed interested in the lifestyle, the family name, or the future inheritance. Very few seemed interested in Marcus himself. "You cannot spend your life avoiding relationships," Victoria said gently. Marcus smiled without humor. "I am not avoiding relationships. I am avoiding additions." Victoria leaned back in her chair. "Then tell me what you are looking for." Marcus did not answer immediately. Instead, He watched a yellow taxi move through the streets nearly 40 stories below. Finally, he spoke. I want someone who treats people with respect when there is nothing to gain. That sounds simple. It should be simple. His voice grew quieter. But it is not. Victoria listened carefully. Marcus continued. Everywhere I go, people know who I am before they know me. They see the company. They see the money. They see opportunities. Nobody gets the chance to show who they really are. That comes with success. No, Marcus said. That comes with visibility. The room fell quiet again. After a long moment, Marcus leaned forward. What if nobody knew who I was? Victoria raised an eyebrow. What are you suggesting? I want to disappear. Victoria laughed softly. That is impossible. Not completely. Just long enough to learn the truth about people. Marcus, hear me out. He sat straighter now, energized by the idea he had been considering for months. I want to work inside the company without anyone knowing my name. Victoria stared at him. As what? The lowest position possible. You are serious. Completely serious. Victoria shook her head in disbelief. Do you have any idea what people might say? Marcus smiled. That is exactly what I want to hear. For the first time, Victoria saw something different in her son's eyes. Determination. Conviction. A plan that was already taking shape. And what do you expect to find? She asked. Marcus stood and walked toward the window. The afternoon sun reflected across the skyline as he answered. The kind of person who is kind when nobody important is watching. Victoria watched him carefully. Then she asked the question that would change everything. And if you actually find her? Marcus turned around and smiled. Then it will be worth every second. The following Monday morning, while thousands of employees arrived at Johnson Global Holdings, a new cleaner quietly stepped through the lobby doors carrying a supply cart and wearing a simple company uniform. Nobody paid attention to him. Nobody recognized him. And that was exactly how Marcus wanted it. The first thing Marcus noticed was how invisible people became when they wore a maintenance uniform. On his first morning, hundreds of employees streamed through the lobby carrying laptops, coffee cups, and expensive briefcases. Some were friendly with one another. Some were rushing to meetings. Most never even looked in his direction. Marcus pushed his cleaning cart across the marble floor and quietly observed everything. A security guard glanced at his badge for less than a second before waving him through. An executive nearly bumped into him while typing on her phone and did not bother apologizing. By 10 o'clock that morning, Marcus had already learned more about the company culture than months of executive reports could ever reveal. The building itself was impressive. 42 floors of glass, steel, and ambition. Yet behind the polished image, he began noticing patterns. Employees spoke differently depending on who was standing nearby. Managers who smiled at senior executives often ignored support staff completely. People thanked vice presidents for small favors, but rarely acknowledged the workers cleaning conference rooms or delivering supplies. Around lunchtime, Marcus entered a break room carrying a box of fresh paper towels. Several employees were gathered around a table discussing promotions. The moment he walked in, the conversation stopped. One man smirked. Another glanced at the cleaning cart and rolled his eyes. Marcus quietly replaced the supplies and headed toward the door. As he left, he heard someone whisper, "At least my career did not end with a mop and bucket." Laughter followed. Marcus kept walking. He did not react. That was the point of the experiment. People revealed their true character when they believed someone had no power. During the afternoon, he was assigned to clean several executive offices. One department manager handed him a trash can without making eye contact. Another left coffee cups scattered across a conference table and said, "You people have job security as long as executives keep working." Marcus simply nodded and continued. The words were not surprising. What surprised him was how comfortable people felt saying them. Near 3 o'clock, he was cleaning a hallway outside Human Resources when Samantha Reed appeared. She walked confidently in high heels, followed by 2 assistants carrying folders. Samantha stopped abruptly when she noticed a small cleaning bucket positioned near the wall. "Who left that there?" she demanded. Marcus stepped forward. "I did. I am still working on this section." Samantha looked him up and down, then moved faster. "This hallway is used by senior leadership." One assistant laughed softly. Samantha did not smile. "And please keep the equipment out of sight. We are trying to maintain a professional image." Marcus apologized politely and moved the bucket. Samantha turned away without another word. As she disappeared around the corner, Marcus watched thoughtfully. She had not asked his name. She had not treated him like a person. To her, he was simply part of the furniture. But what Marcus did not know was that before the week was over, someone very different was about to walk into his life, and a single act of kindness would change everything. The next few days only confirmed what Marcus had already begun to suspect. The higher someone climbed inside the company, the more invisible support staff seemed to become. Every morning he arrived before sunrise, pushing his cart through quiet hallways while executives prepared for another day of meetings and presentations. By the end of the first week, people had stopped noticing him completely. Some employees left trash on conference tables even when bins were only a few feet away. Others spoke about cleaners as though they were not standing in the room. Marcus listened carefully and remembered everything. One Wednesday afternoon, Samantha Reed called. An emergency department meeting. More than 30 employees gathered in a large conference room on the 27th floor. Marcus had been assigned to clean the room afterward, so he waited quietly outside with his supplies. Through the glass wall, he could see Samantha leading the discussion. Her voice carried confidence and authority. Employees nodded whenever she spoke. Nearly an hour later, the meeting ended. People streamed out carrying laptops and notebooks. Several coffee cups, water bottles, and food containers remained scattered across the tables. Marcus entered and began cleaning. He had barely started when Samantha suddenly returned. She stopped in the doorway and frowned. "Why is this room not finished yet?" Marcus looked up politely. "The meeting ended less than 2 minutes ago." Samantha crossed her arms. "Excuses do not create results." Two employees standing nearby laughed quietly. Marcus nodded. "I understand." Samantha pointed toward the table. "Then work faster." She walked away without another word. One of the employees shook his head and smirked. "Rough day, buddy." The other laughed. "At least expectations are low in your department." They left before Marcus could respond. Later that afternoon, another incident made things worse. A senior manager accidentally dropped a stack of printed reports in the lobby. Papers scattered across the floor. Marcus immediately stepped forward to help gather them. Instead of thanking him, the manager grabbed the documents and said, "Just focus on cleaning. Leave business matters to professionals." Several people overheard the comment and chuckled. Marcus remained calm, but each encounter revealed more about the people around him. The following morning brought something even more surprising. While cleaning near the employee cafe, Marcus noticed a young woman struggling to carry several large storage boxes. Employees walked past her without offering assistance. Some looked directly at her and kept moving. Others pretended not to notice. The woman adjusted the boxes and nearly lost her balance. Marcus immediately set down his cleaning supplies and approached. Before he could say anything, another voice spoke. "First, hold on. Let me help you with those." Marcus turned toward the sound. A young black woman with warm brown eyes and a friendly smile stepped forward. She wore a simple office badge and carried her own workload, yet she still stopped to help. Together they moved the boxes safely onto a nearby table. The woman laughed softly. Whoever designed this filing system clearly never had to carry any of these. The employee smiled gratefully. "Thank you. Most people just walked by." "Everybody needs help sometimes," she replied. Marcus watched the exchange quietly. For the first time since entering the company, he saw someone treating another person with genuine kindness when there was absolutely nothing to gain. Then the woman turned, noticed Marcus standing nearby, and smiled at him too. "Good morning," she said. And for reasons Marcus could not explain, those two simple words immediately caught his attention. Ava Williams became impossible for Marcus to ignore after that morning. Over the next several days, he noticed something unusual about her. She treated everyone exactly the same. Whether she was speaking to an executive, a receptionist, a delivery driver, or a cleaner, her tone never changed. She greeted people by name. She held doors open. She thanked employees for small things most people overlooked. To everyone else, those actions seemed ordinary. To Marcus, they were rare. Late Friday afternoon, he was replacing supplies in a conference room when Ava stepped inside carrying a stack of folders. She smiled when she saw him. "Good afternoon." Marcus smiled back. "Good afternoon." She glanced at the supply cart. "Long day." "A little." "Mine too." She laughed softly and set the folders on the table. I think half the building suddenly remembered deadlines at the same time. Marcus chuckled. "That sounds stressful." "It is." She paused. "But it could be worse." Before Marcus could respond, another employee entered the room. The woman barely acknowledged him. Ava, there you are? Samantha is looking for you. Ava nodded. I will be right there. The employee turned to leave, then glanced at Marcus and frowned. Can someone move this cart? It makes the room look cluttered. Without waiting for a response, she walked away. Ava shook her head. Some people really need hobbies. Marcus laughed. You should not say that. Why not? It is true. She smiled again before picking up her folders. Have a good weekend. You too. As she left, Marcus found himself smiling. It had been years since a conversation felt that genuine. Unfortunately, not everyone shared Ava's attitude. The following week, Samantha seemed to take a special interest in making Marcus's job more difficult. She frequently assigned last-minute tasks through supervisors. She complained about details nobody else noticed. Once, she even called him back to a hallway because a trash bin was angled slightly toward the wall instead of perfectly straight. Presentation matters, she said coldly. Everything reflects on the company. Marcus quietly adjusted the bin. Nearby employees watched the interaction with amusement. One whispered something that made another laugh. Samantha noticed and appeared pleased. The situation grew worse when Brittany Collins began visiting headquarters more frequently. As the daughter of a major investor, she received special treatment everywhere she went. Employees rushed to impress her. Managers offered private tours. Executives invited her to meetings she had no reason to attend. One afternoon, she stopped near the employee cafe while Marcus was cleaning a nearby table. Brittany glanced at him briefly before turning to her companion. I honestly do not understand how people spend their entire lives doing jobs like that. Marcus continued working as though he had not heard her. I would go crazy, Brittany added. Her companion laughed immediately. Neither seemed concerned that the person they were discussing stood only a few feet away. Across the room, Ava looked up from her desk. Her expression changed instantly. And for the first time since arriving at the company, someone was about to challenge the behavior Marcus had been quietly enduring. Ava stood up from her desk before she could stop herself. The conversation near the cafe had clearly bothered her. Brittany was still smiling at her own comment, while several nearby employees pretended not to notice. Ava walked over calmly. Actually, every job in this building matters. The area became noticeably quieter. Brittany turned toward her. Excuse me. I said every job matters, Ava repeated. The company does not function without the people who keep it running. Brittany laughed softly. That is a very inspirational speech. It is common sense. For a moment, nobody spoke. Marcus remained focused on wiping down the table, but he heard every word. Brittany crossed her arms. I'm just saying I could never spend my life doing that kind of work. Ava glanced at Marcus and then back at Brittany. Maybe not. But that does not make anyone less deserving of respect. Brittany's smile faded. She clearly was not accustomed to being challenged. Before the situation could continue, one of her companions quickly changed the subject and guided her away. As they disappeared down the hallway, Ava shook her head and returned to her desk. Marcus approached a few minutes later. You did not have to do that. Ava looked up. Do what? Defend me. She smiled. I was not defending you. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Ava laughed. Okay, maybe I was a little. But mostly I was defending basic decency. Marcus could not help smiling. That seems rare around here. Sometimes. She looked around the office floor. Not everybody is bad. Some people just get caught up trying to impress the wrong people. Her words stayed with Marcus long after the conversation ended. Over the next several weeks, he continued observing the company while quietly getting to know Ava. The more he learned, the more impressed he became. She worked harder than almost anyone else on her floor. She often stayed late helping co-workers finish projects. She volunteered for tasks nobody wanted. Yet despite her efforts, promotions always seemed to go to louder employees with better connections. One evening, Marcus noticed her sitting alone in a conference room, reviewing spreadsheets long after most employees had gone home. You are still here? He asked. Ava smiled tiredly. Quarterly reporting deadline. That sounds important. Apparently important enough to cancel my dinner plans. Marcus laughed. That is unfortunate. Ava shrugged. It is fine. I have gotten used to it. She looked out the window at the city lights below. Sometimes I wonder if hard work actually matters, or if success is mostly about knowing the right people. Marcus considered the question carefully. What do you think? Ava smiled faintly. I think character matters, even if nobody notices. Marcus felt something shift inside him. It was exactly the answer he had hoped existed somewhere in the world. But while Ava continued proving herself every day, Samantha Reed was becoming increasingly irritated. She had started noticing that employees actually liked Marcus. Receptionists greeted him. Security guards chatted with him. Even department assistants seemed comfortable around him. Samantha viewed that popularity as inappropriate. In her mind, support staff were supposed to stay invisible. One Friday morning, she watched Marcus and Ava talking near the elevator bank. Her expression hardened immediately. Then she turned to one of her managers and quietly said, "I think it is time we remind certain employees where they belong." The following Monday, Samantha began putting her plan into motion. It started with small things that seemed harmless on the surface. Marcus suddenly found himself assigned to the busiest sections of the building. Tasks that normally required 3 people were handed to him alone. Requests arrived one after another with impossible deadlines attached. If a conference room needed attention, Samantha wanted it done immediately. If an executive office needed supplies, she expected instant results. Whenever something was delayed by even a few minutes, she made sure everyone heard about it. "This is exactly why standards matter," she announced loudly one afternoon while standing near the reception area. Several employees glanced toward Marcus. Samantha continued, "Some people simply do not understand professionalism." Marcus remained calm and continued working. He knew exactly what she was doing. What surprised him was how many people chose to follow her lead. Employees who had never spoken negatively before suddenly joined the behavior. A few laughed when Samantha made sarcastic comments. Others began treating Marcus with less respect simply because a senior leader had set the example. The atmosphere changed. Ava noticed it immediately. One afternoon, she found Marcus organizing supplies in a storage room. "You know she is targeting you, right?" Marcus smiled slightly. "That obvious? Everybody sees it." Ava crossed her arms. "I do not understand why." Marcus carefully stacked a box on a shelf. "Sometimes people need someone beneath them to feel important." Ava shook her head. "That is sad." "Maybe." She studied him for a moment. "Does it bother you?" Marcus considered the question. "Less than it probably should." Ava laughed softly. "You are strange." "I have heard that before." For a few seconds, they simply smiled at each other. Then Ava's phone buzzed. The smile disappeared from her face. She glanced at the screen and sighed. "More work?" Marcus asked. "Always." She slipped the phone back into her pocket. "Sometimes I feel like I am running on a treadmill. No matter how hard I work, I never get anywhere." Marcus looked at her carefully. "You will." Ava shrugged. "Maybe." What neither of them knew was that Samantha had already found a new way to create trouble. Later that week, an important client presentation nearly went wrong when several meeting materials disappeared shortly before a scheduled executive briefing. Employees searched conference rooms, printers, and storage areas. Frustration spread throughout the office. Samantha immediately took charge. "Find out who had access to these documents," she ordered. Within an hour, whispers began circulating through multiple departments. By lunchtime, people were exchanging suspicious glances. By mid-afternoon, Samantha called several managers into her office. Then she requested security reports. When Ava heard what was happening, a knot formed in her stomach. Something about the situation felt wrong. That feeling only grew stronger when she walked past Samantha's office and accidentally overheard part of a conversation. "We finally have a reason," Samantha said. "Now let us see if he can explain this." Ava stopped walking. Her heart sank. Because somehow, against all logic, the missing documents were about to be connected to Marcus. The rumors spread through headquarters faster than anyone expected. By the next morning, employees were already whispering about missing presentation materials and an internal investigation. Nobody knew the full story, but that did not stop people from creating their own versions. Marcus noticed the change immediately. Conversations stopped when he entered rooms. People exchanged looks. A few employees who normally greeted him suddenly avoided eye contact. Samantha appeared unusually confident. Around noon, Marcus was cleaning a conference room when a supervisor approached him. "Human Resources wants to see you." Marcus nodded calmly. "Right now?" "Immediately." 20 minutes later, he sat across from Samantha in a glass-walled meeting room. 2 managers occupied seats beside her. Several folders rested on the table. Samantha folded her hands. "Marcus, we have a serious issue." "What happened?" Samantha opened one of the folders. Confidential client presentation materials disappeared yesterday. Marcus listened quietly. Okay. Samantha narrowed her eyes. According to building access records, you were working near the executive conference floor shortly before the documents went missing. Marcus remained calm. I clean that floor almost every day. One manager shifted uncomfortably. Samantha continued. You also had access to multiple conference rooms. So did dozens of employees. Samantha ignored the comment. Can you explain why your access badge appears in the area during the relevant time frame? Marcus almost smiled. Because I was doing my job. The room became silent. Samantha clearly disliked the answer. This is not a joke. I know. Then help us understand the situation. Marcus looked directly at her. I have nothing to explain because I did not take anything. Samantha leaned back in her chair. Interesting. The words sounded less like an observation and more like an accusation. Outside the room, several employees had already noticed the meeting. Curious glances appeared through the glass walls. By late afternoon, the situation became even worse. Samantha instructed security to review additional records. She requested written statements. She spoke openly about professionalism, trust, and accountability. Every conversation seemed designed to point suspicion in one direction. Ava watched everything unfold with growing frustration. Nothing about the situation made sense. Marcus had never given anyone a reason to doubt his integrity. More importantly, the evidence Samantha kept mentioning sounded vague and incomplete. That evening, Ava stayed late after most employees left. She could not stop thinking about the investigation. While organizing files, she accidentally noticed something unusual in a scheduling report. The timestamp attached to one conference room access record did not match the timeline Samantha had presented earlier. Ava frowned. She checked another report. Then another. The discrepancy appeared again. Her pulse quickened. Either someone had made a major mistake or important information was being ignored. Before she could investigate further, her office phone rang. The caller identification displayed Samantha Reed. Ava hesitated before answering. Hello. Samantha's voice sounded cold. I need you in my office first thing tomorrow morning. Is something wrong? That depends. A brief pause followed. And Ava, do not discuss this investigation with anyone. The line went dead. Ava slowly lowered the phone. Across the city, Marcus received a brief text message from an unknown number. It contained only 6 words. Tomorrow changes everything. Be ready. Ava barely slept that night. The missing documents, the strange timestamps, Samantha's behavior, and the warning not to discuss the investigation kept replaying in her mind. By 7 o'clock the next morning, she was already sitting at her desk reviewing records again. The more she looked, the less sense the official story made. Several access logs appeared incomplete. Important details were missing. Even stranger, one of the conference rooms connected to the investigation had been entered by multiple executives after the time Samantha claimed the documents had disappeared. Ava printed copies and placed them inside a folder. She wanted answers before anyone else controlled the narrative. At 8:30, she entered Samantha's office. Samantha sat behind her desk with the confidence of someone who believed everything was proceeding exactly as planned. Please sit down, she said. Ava complied. Samantha folded her hands. I understand you have been asking questions about the investigation. Ava remained calm. I noticed some inconsistencies. Samantha's expression hardened. That is not your responsibility. Maybe not. But if someone is being accused unfairly, it matters. Samantha leaned forward. Be careful, Ava. Your loyalty to a maintenance employee is becoming noticeable. Ava felt irritation rise inside her. This is not about loyalty. It is about facts. Samantha smiled coldly. Facts are exactly what we are discussing. The meeting ended several minutes later, but Ava left with an uncomfortable feeling. Samantha had not answered a single question. Instead, she had spent the entire conversation discouraging further investigation. Meanwhile, across the building, Marcus continued his normal routine. He cleaned offices, restocked supplies, and observed the growing tension around him. Many employees now viewed him differently. Some openly avoided him. Others whispered when he passed. The accusations had accomplished exactly what Samantha wanted. They had isolated him. Around noon, Marcus entered the employee cafe and noticed Brittany speaking excitedly with several executives. I heard the successor announcement could happen any week now, she said. Can you imagine being connected to that family? One executive laughed. Half the city is trying to figure out who Victoria Johnson will choose. Brittany smiled confidently. Well, some people are simply born for leadership. Marcus almost laughed. The irony was impossible to ignore. Brittany spent enormous energy trying to impress a man she would not even recognize standing beside her. Later that afternoon, Ava found Marcus organizing supplies near a storage area. She looked troubled. "Something is wrong," she said quietly. Marcus closed the cabinet door. "What happened?" Ava hesitated. "I think someone wants this investigation to reach a specific conclusion." Marcus studied her expression. "And what conclusion is that?" Ava lowered her voice. "You." For several seconds, neither spoke. Finally, Marcus smiled. "Then they are going to be disappointed." Ava looked surprised by his calm reaction. Most people would have been angry, worried, or defensive. Marcus seemed almost amused. Before she could ask why, an announcement suddenly echoed through the building. "Attention, all employees. An emergency company-wide meeting has been scheduled for tomorrow morning. Attendance is mandatory." The message repeated twice. Throughout headquarters, conversations stopped. Employees exchanged confused looks. Emergency meetings were rare. Company-wide emergency meetings were almost unheard of. Ava looked at Marcus. Marcus looked toward the nearest speaker. Somewhere deep inside, he knew exactly what was coming. And for the first time since entering the company, the end of the experiment was finally within sight. The morning of the emergency meeting arrived with an atmosphere unlike anything the company had experienced before. Employees filled elevators earlier than usual. Conversations echoed through hallways. Nobody seemed to know why the meeting had been called, but everyone had a theory. Some believed a merger was coming. Others expected a major leadership announcement. A few worried about layoffs. By 9 o'clock, nearly every employee had gathered inside the largest conference auditorium in the building. Samantha sat near the front with several senior executives. Her confidence had returned. In her mind, the investigation was nearly complete. The missing documents had created exactly the opportunity she needed. Ava entered the auditorium carrying the folder she had assembled the night before. She still had unanswered questions, and she was determined not to ignore them. As she found a seat, she noticed Marcus standing near the back wall beside several maintenance employees. Unlike everyone else, he appeared completely relaxed. Ava found that strange. The entire company seemed nervous except him. Moments later, Victoria Johnson entered the room. Instantly, hundreds of conversations stopped. The billionaire founder walked to the stage with calm authority. Several board members followed behind her. The sight alone confirmed that this meeting was far more important than anyone had expected. Victoria welcomed everyone and thanked them for attending. Then she surprised the room. "Before we discuss the future of this company," she said, "there is an important matter that must be addressed." Samantha sat a little straighter. This was it. Victoria continued. "Integrity is the foundation of leadership. Without integrity, success means nothing." Several executives nodded. Samantha smiled slightly. Everything sounded exactly like the beginning of an investigation report. Then Victoria turned toward the human resources section. "Samantha Reed, please join me on stage." Samantha immediately stood. Employees exchanged curious looks as she walked confidently to the front of the room. Victoria thanked her for her service and asked several questions about company culture, employee treatment, and internal standards. Samantha answered each one smoothly. Years of executive experience made her comfortable under pressure. Then Victoria asked a different question. "Do you believe every employee deserves equal respect?" Samantha answered without hesitation. "Absolutely." Ava nearly laughed. Around the room, several employees shifted uncomfortably. Victoria nodded thoughtfully. "That is good to hear." She paused. "And do you believe accusations should always be supported by complete evidence?" Samantha's smile weakened slightly. "Of course." Victoria looked toward the audience. "Excellent." At that exact moment, a large screen behind the stage illuminated. Several files appeared. Access logs, security records, internal reports. Samantha's expression changed instantly. Ava recognized the documents. They were the same records she had been reviewing. But unlike the incomplete versions circulated during the investigation, these files appeared complete. Every timestamp, every entry, every detail. The room became silent. Samantha stared at the screen. For the first time in months, she looked genuinely uncertain. Then Victoria spoke again. "In that case, I think everyone deserves to see the full truth." And as the first security timeline appeared on the screen, Samantha realized the meeting was no longer going according to her plan. The first timeline displayed on the screen for everyone to see. A quiet murmur spread across the auditorium. Victoria stood calmly while employees examined the information. Every movement connected to the missing documents had been recorded. Every entry into the conference area appeared in precise chronological order. Samantha stared at the screen without blinking. The records showed that the documents had remained inside the conference room long after the time she claimed they had disappeared. Several executives exchanged confused looks. One board member adjusted his glasses and leaned forward. Another timeline appeared. Then another. Each one revealed the same thing. The original accusation made no sense. Marcus had entered the area only to perform scheduled maintenance tasks. He had left exactly when his assignment ended. Multiple executives entered afterward. Additional employees accessed the room later. The evidence was clear. Marcus could not have been responsible. A wave of whispers swept through the audience. Employees who had spent days repeating rumors suddenly looked uncomfortable. Ava watched silently, relief mixed with frustration. She had suspected the truth, but seeing it displayed publicly felt completely different. Victoria allowed the room a moment to absorb the information before speaking again. The complete investigation found no evidence whatsoever connecting Marcus to the missing materials. Samantha swallowed hard. Victoria continued. In fact, the documents were discovered in a different conference room after being misplaced during a scheduling transfer. Several employees gasped quietly. The entire controversy had been based on assumptions. Worse than assumptions, it had been fueled by selective information. Victoria turned toward Samantha. As Human Resources Director, do you believe incomplete information should be used to damage an employee's reputation? Samantha hesitated. For the first time all morning, she seemed unable to find the right words. No, she finally answered. Of course not. Victoria nodded. Then perhaps you can explain why multiple reports were distributed without the complete access records attached. The auditorium became completely silent. Samantha glanced towards several executives as though searching for support. None came. Brittany sat frozen in her seat. The confidence she displayed every day had vanished. Victoria clicked a remote. Another document appeared. This one showed internal communications, dates, requests, approval chains, everything. The pattern became impossible to ignore. Certain details had been emphasized. Others had been omitted. The result created a narrative that pointed directly at Marcus. Samantha looked increasingly uncomfortable as the evidence accumulated. Then Victoria asked a question nobody expected. Tell me, Samantha, during the past 3 months, how often have you personally interacted with Marcus? Samantha looked confused. I do not know. More than once. Yes. More than 10 times. Samantha hesitated again. Probably. Victoria nodded thoughtfully. Then you had every opportunity to evaluate his character yourself. The room remained silent. Victoria slowly looked across the audience. Character matters. Not job titles. Not income. Not status. Character. Then she turned back toward Samantha. And today, everyone in this room is about to learn why that lesson is so important. For several long seconds, nobody moved. Hundreds of employees sat frozen in their seats, waiting for Victoria Johnson to continue. The atmosphere inside the auditorium felt electric. Samantha remained on stage, visibly uncomfortable. Brittany stared toward the front row, confused and increasingly nervous. Ava could not shake the feeling that something enormous was about to happen. Victoria slowly stepped away from the podium and looked across the audience. 3 months ago, she began, I approved a very unusual project. Curious whispers immediately spread through the room. Victoria raised her hand and silence returned. The purpose of that project was simple. I wanted to learn what kind of culture truly existed inside this company. Not the culture written in reports. Not the culture presented during executive meetings. The real culture. Samantha's expression changed. Ava leaned forward in her seat. Victoria continued. I wanted to know how people treated others when they believed nobody important was watching. A large photograph suddenly appeared on the screen behind her. It showed a young man in a business suit standing beside Victoria at a charity event several years earlier. Gasps echoed throughout the auditorium. Several employees immediately recognized Victoria. Then they recognized the man standing beside her. Samantha's face turned pale. Brittany looked as though she had stopped breathing. Ava stared at the image in disbelief. It was Marcus. The same Marcus everyone believed was a cleaner. The same Marcus who had been mocked, ignored, and falsely accused. Victoria smiled gently. Many of you have spent the past 3 months getting to know my son. Complete silence filled the room. Nobody even attempted to whisper. Marcus Johnson is not a maintenance employee, Victoria said. He is my only son. He is the future owner of this company. And he volunteered to spend the last 3 months working anonymously inside this organization. The room exploded with shock. Employees looked at one another with wide eyes. Some covered their mouths. Others simply stared at Marcus in disbelief. Samantha seemed unable to move. Brittany looked completely stunned. Every sarcastic comment, every dismissive remark, every moment of disrespect suddenly returned to haunt them. Victoria turned toward the back of the auditorium. Marcus. Slowly, Marcus stood. He no longer looked like an invisible employee. He looked exactly like the leader he had always been. Every eye in the room followed him as he walked down the center aisle toward the stage. Nobody laughed. Nobody whispered. The confidence in his posture changed everything. When he reached the stage, Victoria handed him the microphone. Marcus looked across the audience. I learned a lot during these 3 months, he said calmly. I met people who treated others with kindness regardless of position. I met people who believed character matters more than status. And unfortunately, I also met people who judged others based entirely on a job title. His eyes briefly moved across the audience. Samantha lowered her gaze. Brittany looked away. Then Marcus smiled slightly. The good news is that character always reveals itself eventually. And as the reality of what had happened finally settled over the auditorium, every person who had ever underestimated him realized their lives inside the company would never be the same again. The auditorium remained silent long after Marcus finished speaking. Nobody seemed to know how to react. The man they had overlooked for months was now standing on stage beside the most powerful person in the company. Every assumption had collapsed in a matter of minutes. Victoria stepped forward once more. Leadership is not about titles, she said. It is about character. And during this experiment, character was revealed very clearly. She turned toward the audience and began recognizing employees who had demonstrated professionalism, kindness, and integrity regardless of status. Several names appeared on the large screen. Ava Williams was among the first. The moment her name appeared, applause filled the room. Ava looked stunned. She had never expected attention. She had simply treated people the way she believed they should be treated. Marcus smiled as he watched her reaction. Victoria continued. Employees who consistently demonstrated respect for others will be considered for new development and leadership opportunities. More applause followed. Then her expression became serious. Unfortunately, the experiment also revealed behavior that does not represent the values of this company. The room grew quiet again. Samantha sat motionless. Brittany stared at the floor. Victoria explained that the board had completed a full review of the investigation process, workplace conduct, and employee treatment. Decisions had already been made. Samantha would no longer serve in her leadership role. The announcement sent another wave of shock through the audience. Several executives exchanged glances. Others nodded quietly. Nobody appeared surprised. The evidence had spoken for itself. Brittany's special access to company operations would also be discontinued. For months, she had assumed her family connections guaranteed. Influence. Now she understood that influence without character meant very little. As the meeting concluded, employees slowly began leaving their seats. Conversations erupted throughout the auditorium. Some people looked embarrassed. Others looked inspired. Many simply looked thoughtful. Ava remained seated, trying to process everything she had just learned. Then she noticed Marcus walking toward her. For a moment, neither spoke. Finally, Ava laughed softly. You could have told me. Marcus smiled. That would have ruined the experiment. Ava shook her head. I cannot believe any of this. Honestly, neither can I. She studied him carefully. So all this time, you were evaluating the company? Partly. Marcus paused. But I was also searching for something. Ava raised an eyebrow. What? Marcus smiled warmly. Proof that people like you still exist. Ava felt her cheeks warm slightly. Before she could respond, Victoria approached and greeted her personally. The conversation that followed felt surreal. Yet despite everything that had happened, one thing remained unchanged. Marcus and Ava spoke to each other exactly the same way they always had. No titles, no status, no pretense, just honesty. Several months later, Marcus officially began preparing to lead the company. Ava accepted a new leadership development position created specifically to recognize her talent and dedication. Their friendship continued to grow naturally, built on trust rather than appearances. And throughout Johnson Global Holdings, one lesson became impossible to forget. You never truly know the value of a person by looking at a job title, a paycheck, or a uniform. Character is revealed by how people treat others when they believe there is nothing to gain. And in the end, that lesson changed far more lives than anyone ever expected.